Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. All I need is a couple of head nods. That's sufficient these days.
And Jillian, just one moment. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, if everyone could mute yourselves until we get to the breakout rooms, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me today, and thank you for the introduction, Sue. I'm really happy to be here. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I feel like in the current context of this pandemic and the major transitions that we've all kind of had to adapt to and adopt, uh, the element of social connection and well-being is really highly important at this stage of our society, our development, and all of that. So one of the things I just kind of want to point out is my bias and the lens in which I see the world. Sue alluded to my education and a little bit about my career path. And I know that I take a biopsychosocial approach to just about everything I do. And I'm fully aware that that is my bias, that is the lens in which I see things through. And I also find it an incredibly valuable lens in order to help us determine where we spend our time and energy and what we get back from where we focus our attention. So today, I really want to be talking about wellness and social connection, but it has a much bigger scope. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like today and what I mean by that, and how wellness and social connection impacts each of you and the organizations you work with and work through today and moving forward. So I have a brief agenda. I'm just going to put all those out there. I am going to give a little overview about mental health, well-being, and social support. We're then going to talk about what that looks like at the individual level and maybe what that looks like at the organizations and institutions we work with and through. And talk a little bit about the practical considerations, which range from, the financial impacts that this past year is going to have on our future years, at least year or many to come. And also kind of some of the gaps that are going to be there that we might be able to fill in some way, shape, or form as a result of the financial impacts and practical considerations that universities and institutions are going to need to be making. And you'll be chatting about, opportunities that offers to you all and how that might relate back to our social well-being and connections. And absolutely want to leave time for Q&A. This is a big topic, and I'm just taking a very small sliver of it to introduce you today to and to talk through. So many of you may have seen the description and have had this little image up in the front, but this little image is a pretty powerful image for the work that I do. And I just want to use this as some context for our discussion. The 8 dimensions of wellness, this is not the end all be all, the only framework or the best framework. It's just a framework that is easy to digest. So it's one that I use quite a bit with my clients, as well with groups that I work with, because it's very easily understandable. And one of the things that I just want to point out to you on this image, I guess, for lack of a better term, is the fact that we're going to focus on our social well-being, which is developing a sense of connection and belonging and strong social support systems. But you'll notice that each one of these dimensions overlaps with other dimensions. And you'll notice that none of them is kind of on its own, but they're all connected. And as such, a change in one area of our well-being is going to impact many other areas. Now, when I work with large groups, sometimes, or even individuals, sometimes I will go through this framework and ask people to assess, on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, how satisfied are you with your emotional well-being, your financial well-being, your spiritual well-being, your occupational well-being? And inevitably, when I do that, people will start doing their ratings, going, yeah, I'm pretty solid in my occupational, health and well-being, but my financial situation is not ideal, or vice versa. And then also inevitably, once we get all of those scores, lots of people will then zone in on the area that they have the least satisfaction in and want to fix that. And although that is an approach, I don't always suggest it is the best approach. Because when we can focus on an area that we actually have some control over and that we can have take immediate action on, an area that is easy to make a change around, then we're likely to have success. And that is likely to expand our entire well-being. It's likely to impact other areas of our lives. So I say that to you because I'm going to send this presentation out. You can all take it, play with it, do whatever you like with it. But if you do go through that process of you want to do a self-assessment and identify your satisfaction, I just encourage you not to necessarily focus on the area that is the worst or the least satisfying, but build upon a strength, because we all have different strengths, opportunities, and weaknesses. But there's no reason to hyper-focus on the things that aren't working necessarily. So one of the things that I think is important to recognize is when we're starting to talk about these areas of our well-being, again, as a mental health provider and someone who's focused on these kinds of issues in my work, I think it's important to get a general understanding of what we are seeing in regards to individuals' mental health and well-being. And some folks have a solid understanding of this. Some folks have absolutely no awareness of what this might look like. So again, to provide some context, 1 in 5 US adults experience a mental illness in a given year. So when we start looking at this room alone, there is a chance that several of us in this room are going to suffer with some kind of mental health condition in the coming year. 1 in 25 experience serious mental health issues. And for youth, we're seeing about 17% of kids 6 through 17 are suffering with some kind of mental health disorder. Now, the most common are anxiety and depression in the United States. About 19% of Americans are going to suffer with an anxiety disorder of some form or another, and about 7% will suffer with depression. There's significant difference between individuals of different backgrounds, different ethnicities and races. There are some groups that are at higher risk than others, but generally speaking, those are the numbers. And I just want to point out, those are the numbers that were published in 2019, which was kind of looking back at 2018. And I say that because we've seen a pretty significant spike in anxiety, depression, and substance use in the past year or past 8 months. Now, I don't know if that is a trend that is going to continue, but it is one that I think the mental health world is quite concerned about. And you might be going, okay, why are we talking about mental health now? I thought we were talking about social connection. Well, the reality is that social isolation is a precursor to many of these conditions. Boredom, social isolation, loneliness are going to exacerbate anxiety, depression, and substance use. And that's one of the things we're seeing in this pandemic is that people are disconnected. We're having less social connections, or they're changing, and they're not quite the same. So we're seeing a rise in these kinds of conditions. Now, many of you might be going, oh, well, that's not me, which is fine. But let me ask this question, and you all have a little reactions button across the bottom of your screen. I think most people know where that is. There's a little where you can raise a hand or put a thumbs up. If you can't find it, feel free to just wave your hands or put your actual thumbs up. Let me just ask this of the group. Anyone in this room ever find themselves stressed out over work or family or their health, so much so that they had trouble sleeping for a couple days in a row or a couple weeks? Yep, that's me. Thumbs up, raise hands, anybody, anybody? Couple, or feel free to chat in. Yep. Perfect. So it's common, that's fairly common. How many people in this room have ever lost somebody that they loved and it took an awful long time to get over it and get back to who they really were before? That's me. Raise a hands. Anybody else ever had that experience? Okay. How many folks in this room have ever married, divorced, changed jobs, or moved across the country? And it took a little bit of time, more time than they wished, to kind of find their footing in their new roles. Raise hands. Yep, pretty common. So I say that because a lot of times people don't recognize that they are that these symptoms, although not a mental health condition in and of themselves, but these symptoms, if they are prolonged and if they go on for weeks on end or months on end, we actually transition from having a symptom or problem sleeping to a diagnosable mental health condition that is recognized in the DSM. So most of the folks that I work with have these symptoms that may be short term, but then they start kind of progressing to longer term. And we start realizing they're impacting our ability to function at our best. It's impacting our performance, our relationships, our productivity, things of that nature. So these are really common, and sometimes people don't recognize that they've transitioned over to a diagnosable mental health condition. Now, one of the elements of mental health conditions, when I talk about I moved across the country, or got a new job, or I lost somebody I loved, or I was stressed out and was staying up in the middle of the night, I realize is many times all of those things are connected with I don't have the social support I used to have. My world looks different, and those people I relied on are either no longer there because I moved, or because they passed, or because I'm in a new role. And that common feature of I don't have the social connections that I once did really can exacerbate these kinds of conditions. The other piece that, again, I wouldn't be worth my weight if I didn't at least address substance abuse in the current situation as well. And I won't dive into this too deeply. But social isolation, when you don't have those social supports, when you don't have those outlets, when your life looks a little bit different and you are disconnected, it is very easy to want to fill that void with other activities that can be healthy or unhealthy. And one of the things that we've seen for sure over the past 7 months is there's been a significant increase in the sale and use of alcohol to kind of fill that gap of boredom and social isolation. And boredom and social isolation are the two elements that exacerbate any of these kinds of conditions. Again, I won't go too far into this, but the one area that I think is important just to point out, most people don't even have a common concept of what healthy or unhealthy alcohol use looks like. So just a rule of thumb, everybody's a little different based on our age and our health conditions and our religious beliefs and things of that nature. But generally speaking, for women, having no more than 4 drinks on any one occasion or 8 in a given week, you want to stay under those limits in order to remain in the healthy, safe category. For men, it's no more than 5 drinks in one occasion or no more than 15 in a given week. Lots of people will ask, why do men and women have different numbers? Just because the ability to metabolize alcohol through our fat storage is different for men and women. So there are significantly different levels of what is considered safe. And again, when you think of pre-pandemic, many folks, and folks of all ages, from our teenagers all the way through the lifespan, realize they're spending more time with less to do. So people are relying on alcohol to reduce some of the stress, reduce some of the isolation and the loneliness that we're experiencing. And again, for a short duration, not the end of the world. Really isn't. I don't have any judgment. I drink myself. And also did notice that earlier on the pandemic, it was a lot easier to have a drink every couple of nights rather than just on the weekends when I was out with my friends. And then you kind of step back and realize, wait a minute, what am I filling here? What is the void that I'm filling? And we're finding this is having impacts across the board. So those are kind of two of the big components that I'm concerned about when we're starting to talk about the trends around our social well-being, social isolation, and our ability to cope. One of the things that I came across, and I just thought it fits so nicely, were these two statements um, related to suicide and also aging around major depression and generalized anxiety. And really says social connection is the critical factor to emotional health and social stability. And when we start looking at what's been going on organizationally, institutionally, societally, we're seeing that we're having less and less of those direct contacts, those direct connections, those opportunities to meet and chat. So even this morning, when Sue said I was thinking about using these breakout rooms to get people to just to talk for a few minutes, those are really powerful moments in this time to maintain those connections, to have those unstructured, contacts and communications that can really keep us feeling important, valued, like we have something to say and something to share, heard, all of that. Again, I've alluded to this already, but the idea that social isolation and loneliness are associated with major depression and generalized anxiety. Now, loneliness and social isolation was actually a trend that we were starting to see long before this pandemic emerged. Really, it was connected very much so with the boom of technology. We were seeing more and more ways that people were connecting through technology, but less and less true relationship building. And we started to see people saying, yep, I have, 750 friends on Facebook, but I don't really talk to anybody, or nobody really knows me. So we're seeing that disconnection long before the pandemic arose, and now recognizing that it's something that we're really going to have to take action on and do something with in order to effectively move through some of the challenges that we're faced with. So again, none of this is going to be a surprise to you, but I think it's worth mentioning that the benefits of social support are really far and wide. And when I go back to talking about the 8 dimensions of wellness, you'll see that many of the things in those 8 dimensions are impacted by social connections. So mental health conditions I talked about, so that's a huge benefit. When people are connected, they're less likely to be depressed. When they're with other people, they're less likely to be focused on their anxieties. When they're with people, they're less likely to need to fill that void with substances. Social support increases resiliency. When you've got a cheering squad that's saying you can do it, or why don't you try this, or have you thought of that, it allows people to take greater risks, do things that they never thought were possible. So it really will help develop individual resiliency when you have that social support and that network. Our ability to cope. I mean, you can just look through your lives and remember a time that was really challenging, and who were the people that helped you through it. And it might not have been the people you were friends with. It might not have been your family. It could have been almost a stranger, or someone that you met and developed a close bond with because there was a shared challenge. But usually there's another human being that helps us through challenging times. Provides an opportunity for new experiences. When we are alone, when we are not connecting with others, our frame of reference is really limited. And when we start talking with folks from different backgrounds, different experiences, we start learning things that we never thought were possible. Whether that's a skill, whether that's an experience, whether it's an idea, either way, really expands our horizons. Physical health outcomes. A lot of people don't buy this one, but there's a ton of research on the impact of social support around having good physical health outcomes. Women, for instance, do a lot better physically when they have social support in their exercise programs. When there is a partner to walk with or go to the gym with, or there's a group class that somebody can attend, that seems to be a really positive impact. When people have a group that they walk with, run with, train with, play with, read with, they tend to do better across the board in all health outcomes. We reach stretch goals. Again, going back to the idea of we can see further and wider when we have other sets of eyes looking in the same direction with us. So when you have individuals that are saying, well, what about that? Or how about this? Have you considered? I give a personal example here. I was so fortunate, so fortunate. I had a wonderful mentor early in my career, absolutely amazing mentor. And she was like a second grandmother to me, actually mother. She was quite a bit older than I was. And she just made me believe that things that were so outside of my scope of sight were absolutely possible. She said, so Jillian, when you're a doctor, and this is when I barely had my master's degree yet. So when you're a doctor, you're going to do blank. And I'm like, well, that's never going to happen. And she's like, of course it will. You just don't know it yet. When you are sitting in the chair, the big chair down the hall, I'm sure you'll be able to blank. I'm like, oh, that's never going to happen. And all of those things that she said and saw, maybe all of them, we'll see if all of them come true, we've got years to go, really were able to be possible because that seed was planted by another human being who was saying, totally possible. You might not see it, but totally possible. Alternate points of view I referred to, but improving problem solving. Again, when we are in our own heads, we can tell ourselves the same story over and over and over again. We just see the barriers. We just see what we see. And it really limits our ability to think outside the box and problem solve. So this provides a great opportunity for individuals. Social support provides access to resources that someone never knew were available just by individual knowledge that one person may not have and another person does. And it benefits everybody involved. So many times people say, well, I'm helping another person, so therefore they're getting the help. Both parties benefit when there is a relationship built on mutual social support. One might be giving, one might be receiving, but both benefit from the interaction. And at the end of the day, it feels good. Having connections with other human beings just plain out feels good. So with that being said, I'm just going to ask real quickly, I'll go back there. Questions, comments, concerns about some of that so far? Feel free to chat in or raise a hand if there's something I said that you go, oh, that doesn't sit well with me, or I don't buy it. No, we're good. Gray, anybody saying anything I need to be aware of?
Not yet.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So what I would like you all to do, I made some big comments about the benefits of social support, the risks around our mental health, substance abuse, social isolation, some of the trends that we are seeing. We're seeing a significant increase in anxiety, depression, substance use, social isolation. I want you to think, and again, this won't be a bummer, I promise. We're going to get to the good stuff after. I want you to take a minute as a group and just talk about, you have a couple of questions that our facilitators are going to help with. But I want you to take a minute to really think about how the recent 6 to 8 months has impacted some of your own social connections. What did that look like? What has been the impact on your social relationships, your social networks, the real ones, not just your internet relationships, but all of them? And thinking kind of broader as a next step, what are some of the impacts that are likely being faced by faculty, staff, students, or members of the organizations you belong to? So I think we start with ourselves. What did I notice about my social connections and my social well-being? And what might be true for those around me? And then finally, You might not get to all these questions, so your facilitators will help. What are some of the experience, skills, and contributions that you can provide as a social support to your faculty, staff, students, member, participants, to help ensure that there are win-wins between all of those parties involved? So big topic. We're going to give you like 15 minutes to chat. If you need more time, we can do that. And I will ask for some help in getting people into their breakout rooms.
Jillian,
Yes.
there are two comments in chat. One is, I worry about spouses, one of whom is an extrovert and needs social interaction, but the other prefers solitude.
Yes.
And the other is, it seems that there are additional benefits for the person who is providing the support, the mentor, friend, pastor, etc. I would like to discuss how the supporter can provide the right kind of support to someone who needs it and feels good about his/her role.
Okay. So let me start with the first one. We've seen a significant shift in couples being together in relationships, primary relationships in a household where people are now both there and their outlets have changed quite a bit. And the reality is some of the things with intimate partners especially is there is a need right now to renegotiate overtly. Not just, you're annoying, you're always here, or I'm bored to death, I need to get out and talk to others, but to really renegotiate what each individual in that relationship needs, whether it's space for that introvert, I need a room where I don't get interrupted to have some quiet downtime, or for the more extroverted individual, where can we find opportunities for you to get some of those needs met outside of this relationship, because I can't be your go-to person for all of those needs. But that's an actual conversation that needs to be happening overtly and continually for the time being. And we're seeing that a lot in marriage counseling that we're doing at the EAP right now. So that would be my suggestion, and identifying who are those resources for the extrovert. Who are those folks? How do we create time where there's phone time, when there's Zoom time, when there's places that you can go and play, or go out and play golf, or whatever those outlets are. So that's the first one, open, overt conversation. The second one, giving and receiving help. That's a real interesting dynamic, because again, at the end of the day, both parties win. The mentor wins just as much as the mentee. But sometimes feeling like I need help feels a little bit like I'm broken or there's something wrong with me. And the reality is, help is not what you need. If you are helping somebody, there is this kind of difference in power or dynamic of power. Social support is really mutually beneficial, and articulating how the person who is getting mentored is actually helping the person who is mentoring. Again, I'll give you just a personal example, just because I have them. My mentor didn't have grandchildren, didn't have extended family. And the fact that she adopted me, for lack of a better term, there was real power in being able to transmit her experience and her knowledge, that she was valuable, that her ideas were being sought from someone who was going to take them and do something with them. And that was articulated quite a bit, that she was so grateful to have someone that could carry on a tradition or a trajectory or reach a goal that she never was able to reach. So that dynamic of feeling like, yeah, I felt like I was so lucky, but if you were to ask her any day of the week, I think she would say the same thing. I was so lucky. So that's the part that I think has to be articulated for both parties to feel good about the relationship and the social support that they're both getting. I hope that answers. If not, by all means, tag me again. All right. Shall we try and get into our breakout rooms and talk a little bit about our own well-being and what that might look like for the folks we are working with and through?
Yes, thank you, Jillian. This is Sue, and I will be moving people into the breakout rooms momentarily. We will have 15 minutes in the room. I will be facilitating one of the rooms myself, and so will not be in the main room. Jillian, you're going to move automatically into a room. I can't change that, but you can move back into the main room on your own.
Okay.
And I'll stay in one of the rooms. We will have 15 minutes. You will get a 2-minute warning, and then the room will automatically close in 15 minutes and everybody will come back to the main room. So I'm going to pause the recording right now and open the rooms. We will not be recording during the breakout rooms, but our facilitators will be taking notes. All right, here we go.
Fantastic. So it sounds like there were conversations at least going on. And I was in a breakout room. I couldn't get out, so I just stayed in.
Oh, geez. Okay. Still learning these breakout rooms.
which is totally fine. I think it worked. That's fine by me.
Okay.
But I would like to hear from the groups I wasn't part of. What are some of the things that came up, whether it be your own personal experience or what you're noticing for others, or how you can fill some gaps?
You want people to put things in the chat, Jillian, or?
However, if they want to speak, if they want to put it in the chat, either way is fine.
Well, in our group, I know that one of the things we talked about is that there have been some benefits. Our houses have really benefited in terms of getting projects done, but there's only so many projects you can do to distract you from feeling lonely.
Lonely and bored.
Lonely and bored. And that it's been challenging for people who, of course, who still have children at home, which one person in our group did, and for grandparents missing their grandchildren, and lots of other interactions like that.
Fantastic. Anybody else?
It was really interesting to hear from different parts of the country. Some are much more socially isolated than others. Some can do the outdoor socially distancing kind of thing. Some were realizing that they did like some of their alone time, but are missing the in-person and are doing more outreach with telephone and Zoom. And a worry about what's going to happen now that winter is setting in and people are going to be indoors. That's a big concern.
My group talked more about what we are doing or what we could be doing in order to combat social isolation and encourage wellness. And we heard a lot of specific things like opening meetings like half an hour in advance so people could just interact with each other, and then setting up small groups around book clubs, pet sharing, having a sunshine committee, reaching out on the phone to people who may not be connected online the way we assume most people are these days, using a phone tree to contact people and contacting them and offering what you can do for them. And then other kinds of things like a virtual happy hour, sometimes with a speaker, sometimes not. Virtual wine tasting, lots of different ideas that are possible. And also Minnesota, I believe, is setting up a Facebook group, which is different from a Facebook page, where people can come together and identify common interests and things of that sort. So lots of good ideas, what's going on and what organizations can do.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I'm seeing that we are going quite fast on time, unfortunately. But one of the things we talked to in my group, and I just wanted to say it out loud because I got cut off, I think, out of the break room, is the lost art of the pen pal. Is one way of developing very intimate relationships, which again, Zoom connects us, but sharing kind of our thoughts and our feelings and having some time to reflect and put things on paper for another person to actually go to their mailbox and read, it actually creates a sense of connection that's very, very deep, very, very deep. So, you know, leveraging technology is great, but old school is quite powerful. So again, if that's with your students, if that's with your family, if that's with your colleagues, it can be a really powerful way of sharing. So Sue, how do you want me to handle this last set of breakouts? Do we keep going or do we wrap it up?
I think as long as everyone's okay with running a little long, we can keep going. I mean, if you need to leave, we will be sending out the notes and we will be recording the end of the session. So you can always catch it on our website and we'll be sending out the link to that.
So the other element that I just wanted you to talk about is much more of the practical elements of kind of this pandemic and what we've seen happen to individuals' health and well-being and connections. You know, institutions are going to have incredibly large financial impacts, and really difficult decisions are going to need to be made about programs, resources, support services. There are going to be a lot of limitations about what can and can't be done, and people making all sorts of decisions based on financial implications. So inevitably, there are going to be some significant gaps that probably are not going to serve our students, our members, our junior faculty, our all sorts of groups and programs within an organization very well. And one of the things when I start talking about this social connection is a win-win, you all have experience, knowledge, and skills. And we have organizations that are going to be in desperate need of experienced leaders, experienced individuals to help share that knowledge, share their time, share their energy in ways that they may have never needed before. And I don't have the answer here, but that's what I really wanted to have you guys talk about next. You know, who are your partners? Who are your toeholds in your organizations where, again, I gave my example of I just got lucky with a phenomenal mentor and we both really benefited. Are there mentor programs? Are there volunteer programs? Is the provost office going to be in need of experienced individuals to help their students, their junior faculty, their faculty? Or is there something you just always wanted to do and you go, now I get to do it just because I want to? So I want you to take a couple minutes talking about those kinds of entry points, training programs, mentor programs that you might have that are already developed that you might be able to provide an assist to someone who wants the help, someone who is already there saying, I need this thing, but nobody's giving it. So it's that win-win.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you. We'll, for those who were in my room, a couple of people had to leave, which only left a couple of us. So I've reassigned you to other rooms. And so I'm going to open the rooms now. We're going to shorten the time a bit because of time considerations. We're going to have 10 minutes, which I know is not very long. So facilitators and participants, stay on topic as best you can. And we're going to open the rooms now and pause our recording. And Jillian.
Yes. So first of all, I thank you all for the conversations. My apologies for going over. I didn't realize usually these go shorter, not longer. So your conversations were just very inspiring. So what I will just say is, you know, kind of just tying it all together. Social support and connection is just vital to individuals, to groups, to organizations, to all of us. And this kind of intimate relationship building is something we're going to have to actively create. What used to work doesn't work, but some of these new ways of building intimate relationships where you can actually talk to another human being and help another human being and allow another human being to help you is what's going to be really, really helpful. We got some conversations started about ways we might do that organizationally and in small, tiny groups that are safe to be physically near one another. And my challenge to you all was to take those ideas and see if there is one idea that you can actualize in the next 3 months. So you are creating a social connection, you are planning a social connection, you are creating meaning and purpose in your life and another human being's life by connecting. It will have a powerful impact, and we all need that right now. So I thank you. I will stay on for a few minutes if anybody has questions, or I'll share my email that you can always ask me follow-ups if I didn't get to something